The marketplace is shifting, and as the corporate world tries to figure out how to navigate in this world of disruption, we see more and more executives walking out the door. Today's guest is there to help these people when they land, because more of these corporate leaders are turning into fractional executives. Jennifer Ternay is an executive and business coach, a strategic advisor, and an inspirational speaker who shares her knowledge to create wealth and wellness for fractional executives. I've invited her today for a conversation about the process of reinventing your career by taking those skills to become your own boss and how to take care of yourself along the way. So Jen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, we're going to have a great conversation. And one thing I know about you, and just being around you over the past year as you're someone in my mastermind, is you consider yourself an adventurer who believes in living the best life possible by taking these what you call little adventures. So tell me a little bit about what inspired you to adopt this philosophy.
I definitely wandered a little bit of a path. I had struggled a little with the marketing piece of what I was doing with my own business. And I had started on a marketing class and I found that you could speak for a living. So I jumped into this great program where I put together information on creating a keynote, which is the keynote that I have. And in the process of that, I uncovered all the different ways that I was holding myself back. So even though this class or program was supposed to be about how to be a public speaker, it really brought such a huge level of awareness as to how I was getting in my own way, which led to then training as a coach and coming up with this idea of you don't need to make big changes, but the idea that little adventures lead to a big life. And it's how you define what a big life is. And little adventures doesn't mean, wandering around the world, although that might be totally fun. Sometimes it's as little as something that I did last night. I have this thing where growing up, it was always don't waste anything. And I had all these things that were in my garage that were just taking up space. And I didn't really feel good about throwing them out. And so in the meantime, they're sitting in this garage for a couple years, and I live in an area that's very damp. I'm near the ocean, and so mold starts to accumulate. And finally, I got to the point where I was like, these just need to go. And yes. So even that, to me, is a little bit of a little adventure. It's pushing my comfort zone of taking things and actually just putting them in the trash, as silly as that might sound. But it's really fighting those ingrained ways that you're brought up and things that you're taught. So it's really about uncovering those and how you push the boundaries on them.
Yes, that's a great example. And when you think about it, like you were taught not to waste anything, but if they were sitting in your garage, were you really using, were you putting it to good use? And so we have all of these emotions connected with different things in our lives, whether it's a relationship that meant something more at one time, or whether it's things in your garage, or I know one thing when I was cleaning up my house a little bit after my kids left, is I would look at something I had never used and I thought, I paid a lot of money for that.
Right.
But I still wasn't using it. And then I took the perspective of, but I got joy out of purchasing it. I got pleasure of looking at it when I had it. Like there was value in it, even though I never used it. And then I decided, well, somebody else can put it to good use. So sometimes those things just need to go. And what that does is it opens up possibilities for a new type of life for you. Whether it's trying a new restaurant or cleaning out your garage or totally changing your career. There's a lot of different ways to go.
Oh, yeah. And to me, that was one of the biggest shifts that I had was I kept asking, why did it take me so long to understand this? Like, how come nobody ever talked about this? Of all the things that kind of get in your way. Everybody makes it sound like it's so clear cut that you just do X, Y, and Z and you're fine. And it's really not. Not
no,
always.
it's not. It's not. And I also appreciate the fact that in this other program that you thought you were going for one thing, that you were able to discover other things about yourself. And I think that is, that's the mind of a continuous learner. That's the mind of someone who is open to possibility. So look at where it's taken you, not only speaking, but just such an amazing option that you were able to land into.
Yeah, as you know, I've joked sometimes of like the me from even 5 years ago, some of the things that come out of my mouth never would have happened before, because that program, I mean, it's amazing on how much, like, even I used to joke of, it was the Frozen movies that were coming out from the Disney, where the one girl is sort of encapsulated and trapped by her powers, of the idea of like letting it go, that I felt like I was an ice maiden. I think it was a protective thing from having gone through a divorce and becoming a single mom and trying to take care of everything, that I had sort of shut down emotionally or built up these huge barriers around it. And really, to go into a speaking program and uncover all of that and then continue to peel back the layers and understand, it was just such a great experience. But it's also led me to realizing how much I love and appreciate the power of coaching and want to share that with other people, because in my experience, coaching wasn't a thing. Like, it wasn't in my industry. I didn't know anybody that ever had a coach. I didn't know what a coach was. I didn't know what they did. I mean, it was just completely foreign to me.
Yes. And I think if we don't have that exposure, we don't know otherwise, right?
Yeah.
So one thing I know is leaving corporate to start your own business could be considered a reinvention or an adventure. And you have the opportunity, as you're talking about coaching fractional executives. It's not like you haven't tried it yourself. Like, you did this. You were in the corporate world and you made the shift to fractional work. So tell us a little bit about what you were doing in corporate and how that shift happened.
Yeah, I had what I had said at the time was my favorite job. I was running a statewide health plan, and I loved the fact that we got to bring things to the state and a lot of change and sort of even invention or creativity in the goal of making care better for those that we served. And the contract got underbid, like significantly underbid. And being a government contract, I went through the process of actually needing to shut down the office and laying off, I think it was like 90 people. And in the process, lost my job myself. And at the time, my marriage was on the rocks and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So I took a little bit of space and left with the idea that I would jump into consulting as an interim while all of this upheaval was going on in my life. And I found I really enjoyed it. And because of my background, having come up mostly in the finance side of the house, but also having been a CEO, it was very easy for me to do a lot of fractional CFO work with the skills brought to the table of also understanding what it's like to be a CEO and think strategically as opposed to just sort of reporting numbers. And between that and the healthcare experience, I just found a lot of work with different agencies and organizations where I was able to go in and be the fractional CFO. Sometimes it was people that left. Sometimes it was people being asked to go. Sometimes it was just smaller organizations that just needed some additional help. And lots of times when you're in the smaller space, people can't afford a full-time executive, especially somebody like a CFO. And when you bring those higher level skills to the table, they can get it at less of a cost than it would be to hire an employee, which is the whole piece on the fractional. It's not permanent and it's not usually full-time either. So it's great.
Yeah. So, I think the part about that, the ability to look at a function within the business, so the CFO function, having been a CEO. So you get the perspective of how other people see that position. That's a lot of value that you can bring. And so as a fractional CFO coming in, not only do you do that work, but you also understand your audience that you're trying to communicate this to you. You understand what their priorities are. So I could see where that would offer a lot of value.
Yeah, and in the finance world, I would say the CFO role, it depends on the type of company. That one of the things that I really struggled with early in my career was the idea that the CFO just sort of wasn't, I guess the only way I could really describe it is they weren't looked as a partner. And to me, the CFO needs to be a partner to the CEO. They are the person that helps the CEO figure out how they're going to have the funding to execute on the vision and mission of the company. So how do you make it a yes, as opposed to the finance person always being the person that says no? To me, that's been one of the biggest shifts. When you can bring that to the table, it changes the dynamic completely.
Oh, I could definitely see that because yes, a CFO is known as the no person. They're telling you everything you can't do. So yes. help us achieve this vision. How can we work together? So that's a really good point. So, you've mentioned some things for a business, the benefit of bringing in a fractional executive. Let's look at it from the person who is maybe in corporate right now, or maybe they've just been downsized and they're in transition. What are some of the benefits from the executive side of considering fractional work versus finding another full-time position?
Well, with fractional work, the biggest advantage is that you're not an employee. You have your own business. So you get to set a lot more of the terms of what you're looking for, who you're willing to work with, what you want to do. You just have a lot more freedom and flexibility and being picky. So that's always the thing that's always, I think, the hardest thing for people when they start out is that they're so busy looking for any client that they don't realize that they actually have the power to pick the clients that they work best with. And that when they get focused on that, then it just becomes a really great space because you're delivering value and you're enjoying your work and you have a lot more autonomy and control over it. Plus, you don't have to work full time either. I mean, I think that's another huge perk. I know it seems like there's a fair number of women that move, especially into the fractional CFO type of space, because it gives them flexibility depending where they are within their life. If they've got children, they can still make good money, work part-time, and still be there for their kids if they want to. And that doesn't mean that you can't work full-time. You can. You just have to be able to manage your schedule and client expectations. So, yeah, to me, those are the big benefits.
Yes, and I know I do some fractional CMO work, and I think the other thing about it is you get to set your schedule based on your travel and some of the other things. So what is it the company needs? How do you set up and negotiate meetings and what type of value you can bring? And you can be very flexible in that when you start on your agreement. So there is a lot of potential there.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you bring so much to the table, and often we don't realize what we bring to the table, that sometimes you just forget how much you know, or you assume that other people know it and they don't. So that's, I think, some of the fun too.
Yes. And I think the other thing, being a fractional doesn't mean you only have to work for one business. You could be a fractional for more than one business. So think about if you're working in one industry and you see something that could benefit one of your other clients, you also bring that value in too.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've found over the time period, both for myself and working with other people, is the idea that you need to understand how you best work. Do you like short-term projects where it's fewer hours and you have multiple clients, so you've got variety? Or do you prefer to work with maybe a larger client where they're taking up more of your time, but you have fewer clients? And there's pros and cons to all of it. And sometimes the dynamic changes on how you price it, how you negotiate it, what the commitment is. And so a lot of that is just working through and being very clear on how you're defining what it is you're delivering.
Yes, yes. So as an executive and business coach, Jen, what is the most common issue you see fractional executives struggling with, and what do you do to help them address it?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that people tend to get very hung up on is the how do I do X, Y, and Z. So it's they're thinking that they're missing a skill gap, but often it's about not understanding why you weren't doing it. You can go out into the world and find hundreds of different ways to do certain things. Or maybe you'll hear the same thing by different people, but it lands differently. Once you have the knowledge, the question then becomes, how come you don't execute on it? And that's the thing that coaching really gets into. It's the what's behind everything that stops you from moving forward. Or, you interviewed Gay Hendricks, the whole idea of the self-sabotage and how much happiness can you handle before you kind of pull it down. So those are big things that the most repetitive things that I see when looking at it from a coaching perspective. It's the doubt, it's the fear, it's the maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I'm not going to make it. What happens if I fail? And when you start untangling all of that, that's when you really get into how much you're shaped and influenced by things that have happened in your past. And so you have to get clear on those so that you can make your future be what it is that you want it to be.
Yes. And I think a lot of times, as I look at when you work with people, when you leave corporate to start your own business, we think, okay, this is my offer and this is what I'm going to sell to people and this is who I'm going to sell it to. And we get so caught up in the service or the thing or the product that we don't take a step back or even slow down enough to understand what are these stories we're telling ourselves that get in the way. So I know when I work with clients, and most people I know that are really successful have worked on how they approach their business with their mindset.
Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of people, when you say, oh, I work with mindset, they're like, I don't need any help with that. My mind's just fine, right?
Yeah, look at my career. I've done so well.
Yes, yes. But when you have your own business and you are the business, it can be very lonely. Plus, you don't have the outside perspective of someone coming in. So that's the value of working with you. So how do you help people with mindset? Like, how do you approach it?
So I work through trying to get people to understand where they are and kind of where they're going. The model that I have that I've worked on is a little bit different than what you have, but it works through how to have three characteristics when you're there at the end of the day. It's about being courageous, it's about being connected, and it's about being consistent. And it is a multi-step process of going in and looking at things like, what are your limiting beliefs and what are you seeing as possibility? What is your thing that you actually want to do? And how do you go for that? Because so many people talk about wanting to do or be something different or shift careers, or sometimes it's forced events where they now have to go and do reinvention, and they don't know how to go about it. Like, I think sometimes it helps to have a structured process where you walk through and go through everything. And I know there's loads of books out there, but the other thing that I found is that you can read a book and either sometimes you'll do the exercises or think about the things that are in there, but it's not the same as working with other individuals, whether you're in a group or an individual basis, because it's that back and forth dynamic. And the part where often people don't see how they're perceived. With even blind spots. So a lot of people talk about blind spots and you think of it as something bad, but sometimes it's just not seeing you in your best self. And that's what I truly love about coaching, is that it's always about pulling out and highlighting the best self. That doesn't mean that you won't talk about things that maybe aren't so great, but it's really focused on building on your strengths. And often people don't see them. I think.
Right. We don't see the best in others that other people can see in us. So
Yeah.
yeah, that is a benefit of working with someone. I was speaking with a new client yesterday, and I think one of the most interesting things about coaching or consulting is as you're asking questions, they will answer the question. And then more often than not, they have a little qualifying phrase at the end. Like they just happen to mention something, right?
Yeah.
Well, 90% of the time, it's the thing they mention at the end that gives us
That's the
something
thing.
to dig into, right? And I think what that is, that's our head answering the question, but then it's our heart showing up to say, wait for me. Like,
Yes.
don't
Yes.
forget about me. Don't forget about me. So I love this framework that you have. So you've got courageous, you've got connected, and you've got consistent. Have you found one needs to come before the other, or one is easier for people than others?
I think it depends on the person. So for the courageous part, it's often letting people let go of expectations and really getting to the point where either they believe that what they think they want to do is possible, or even in some cases, it's really unleashing the idea that maybe it's something you never even thought of. Like it just has never entered into your universe of things that you've thought about. How do you take all these disparate things? And I think that's one of the things that I've always had, both as a consultant and as a coach, was the ability to see multiple moving parts and put it together in a way that's maybe different. But then I've also had people where, the connected piece is really knowing yourself and understanding who you are and what shapes how you show up. And I mean, I'm a great example. I told you about the sort of being disconnected from my emotions. And a lot of that has to do with that piece of it, but also background and just really diving into who you are and where you've been. And then, it's all great and fine to put all of these ideas out there, but if you can't execute on them and you don't keep any consistency, that's sort of how the piece is there. They really are interconnected. And it depends on the person, because some people are really great. They're very goal oriented. So the consistency part isn't so much the problem. Mm-hmm. So it really depends. But yeah.
And I think one thing you run into as you're describing these three is are the emotions that come up, the feelings that come up. So like when you were talking about distancing yourself and not feeling anything, like I think what's happened is we come into this world and we have feelings and emotions. So if you look at children, they have no problem expressing their emotions, do they? Like they are loud and clear about what they feel. But then we as parents or teachers or school or society start saying, oh, you can't do that. Or, don't be a baby.
Tone it down.
Right. Yes. And so we start learning, oh, those aren't acceptable. And they really aren't acceptable, not because of the person who's expressing it, but because of the people around them can't handle it.
Yes, they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, they're uncomfortable. So look at what that does to us. We learn that, okay, that is not acceptable or appropriate if I want to stay in this community group or as part of this family or in this classroom. Yeah, I'm going to be cast out if I don't do that. And so we all end up being these little robots who stuff our feelings inside. And then we need coaches to help get them out.
Yeah. And I never thought about it between the thought of the energy and the emotion piece are things that I don't remember ever really talking about before getting involved into coaching. And it definitely shapes and drives things so much. And the business world, I don't know if things are entirely changing, but I know coming up in my career, the idea of expressing emotions I mean, that was just taboo. Except for the only people that could get away with it, where there would be this one guy who could blow up and be angry, and that was okay, but nobody else could get away with it. And you definitely couldn't get away with it as a woman. And God forbid that you cry, like show any kind of softer emotion. It's fine to be happy, but to be upset or whatever, how you handle those pieces is interesting. But I think things are shifting a little bit. Depends on the industry, though, maybe.
Yeah.
And
I think that's definitely true. I think our leaders today don't know how to lead in this world where we have people who are more cognizant of the fact that I'm here for more than a paycheck. Like, I would like to be able to contribute value. I would like to be respected. I would like to be heard. Not that they get a voice at making a decision for the company. But, if you're working in a position and you are customer facing and someone is not coming to you asking, well, how, we've got the situation. What do you see? Where do you see the difficulty? Like, being respected for having that knowledge. I think that's where the human part of business needs to open up a little bit, is more listening, more connection, more collaboration. And that's where we get to treat people as humans. So that's a little bit more of the, and I think also for leaders to show their vulnerability. We used to not have that at all. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it's a little bit of a generational issue, as there always are.
Yes.
That the older generation, that whole idea of having emotions and expressing them is pretty limited. And these are somewhat generalizations, but I feel like younger people today are much more in touch and aware of things in a way that, I don't know if it's the influence of social media, if it's the influence of the internet, that you have access to so much more information, but people don't want to commit their life to everything. But then I still see some younger people who, it reminds me of myself, of like the workaholic, and you constantly have to be there, and people are expecting and relying on you, and you get fed by this idea of responsibility. And I'm like, but it's okay to have a life. Like, it's okay. And so it's the space of, I know I've softened up significantly as a person that sometimes leads teams or gets involved in teams, that I try to make sure that anytime I'm working with people to understand that. But it's a little bit different depending on what your situation is, whether or not they can listen to you, because it's different if you're the boss and you have the authority to say, hey, it's okay to be upset or express emotion or look at things. And I know I was just talking to somebody recently, and she was just feeling very weighed down by all the things that she needs to do within her job. And I'm like, you don't understand. You're in a spot right now where you might be able to get to recreate your job, because there's so much growth going on. What do you actually want to do? What do you like to do? Not what do you have to do? What would you like to keep? What would you like to get rid of? Like, working through that process. Now, that also requires that the person that she's talking to has to be open to that conversation. So, and I think maybe my experience might be a little bit different. I did a lot of work in healthcare, so it's a little less verboten. I don't know what it's like if you go out. My career started in public accounting. I don't imagine that would go over super well in public accounting unless things have changed. But in the healthcare space, I think there's a little bit more acknowledgement of it. They've had to deal with so much with the burnout and COVID and everything, and people just being stretched too thin. So,
yes. And I think there is a difference when you're working with numbers, which is all logic based, right? And then you're working with health and wellness, which, I think the other thing that has been brought to the table when you're talking about younger generations, when we have role models like Olympic athletes that are pulling themselves from competition because of the mental health, some of the stress, where we see people stepping away, very public figures stepping away to take care of their mental health.
Right.
20 years ago, you would not speak about mental health except if it was in relation to going to some treatment center. And then that
Yeah.
was all hush. You wouldn't talk about it. So,
Yeah, and I think that's definitely been an influence because my career, I spent a lot of my career in the Medicaid space. So it's individuals that are dealing with low incomes, lots of issues around housing, education. So they're encountering barriers that get in the way of having the life that maybe they want to live. But there's also aspects where I came in through the behavioral health side. So it was a lot of mental health. It was a lot of looking at substance use and what are the issues that people are dealing with. And then I moved into the medical side and they were just looking at like the body part. I'm like, well, what about the things that are getting in the way from a person making the behavior change? So like if you have diabetes and you need to lose weight, but you're used to eating, like that to me is sort of fascinating. And that's where the coaching even ties into all of that, of the what's preventing you from changing your behaviors. Coaching just becomes more, it's not just about behaviors, it's about actions, it's about how you think, but they're all very similar. And I don't think the healthcare issues will ever be resolved until we fully integrate those pieces. But I don't think that needs to stop people from doing it on an individual basis. They can still take ownership of their health and wellness. And
yes,
that's
absolutely.
part of why, I got into the idea of wealth and wellness with the fractional executives, because it's not just about money. It really is about having a life and taking care of yourself.
Yeah. And I think, I love the term wealth and wellness. We think of wealth immediately as connected to money, but there's all kinds of wealth.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that's the secret behind once you start working with me. It's not just about money. Yes, money is super important. Money definitely makes the world easier, but sometimes it's a shift in appreciating what you have and looking at how you define wealth. Is it wealth? Is that money? Is it relationships? Is it how you feel about yourself? All of those are connected.
Yeah. So you were this fractional executive. You moved to coaching. What has been the biggest shift or adjustment for you as you did this?
Yeah. So a lot of it, I think we even touched on, was the idea of really uncovering the what's behind it. But when I went through my coaching program, I found it was very natural. I don't know if some of it is, I think naturally I feel like I'm a problem solver. And in this case, as a coach, you aren't solving a problem. You're really helping people unlock the doors to be able to solve it for themselves and helping them see differently. And for me, that shift has really been in how I show up and how I approach things and looking at life differently. I don't know that I can clearly put it into words to how much it has fundamentally shifted how I look at life and approach life. I probably annoyed the heck out of my daughters during the time because they're like, can we just have mom, not coach mom at times? But I'm like, I would tell them, I'd be like, I'm so sorry, but this is who I am now. I can't undo it. It's a little like the Matrix movie where you've got the red pill and the blue pill. And once you take the pill, you can't unsee.
You're not going back.
Unsee. Yeah. So, yeah, that's definitely been a huge shift.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up this amazing point. Like a lot of times when people are thinking of making, a quarter turn, a reinvention, and it doesn't have to be anything major. Like as you're going through that process, there's the people that are closest to you, your relationships, your family. And when you do turn into this, new goal-oriented or calmer and peaceful person, like your identity shifts a bit, and the people around you who were used to this certain version of you Now this new one has shown up and it's an adjustment for them.
Yeah, it really is. It definitely is an adjustment. And sometimes it results in maybe some relationships not continuing or changing to the point where you may not, you may find even that you don't want to continue the relationship. It may not just be the other person. Like I said, with the whole energy piece, I've really become aware of people that I feel like suck the energy out of you.
Yes.
I remember reading, it's been ages ago, The Energy Bus by John Gordon. And it talks about the energy vampires, of like people that just, and it's not a good situation. So those are people, like there's been a couple where I've just chosen not to continue friendships because it wasn't good for me. Mm-hmm. And, they always say, I don't know who they are, but when your kids are younger, keep telling them you're the effect of who your friends are, and saying that your 5 best friends have the influence. I've definitely noticed that even shifting who you hang around with, whether it's virtually or in person, really has an impact on how you perceive your business. I know for me as a business, and personally too, from a business perspective, I had set certain financial targets. And then I was talking to other people and I was like, wow, I feel like what I thought was a good goal now seems like chump change compared to what other people are doing. And it up levels you. Mm-hmm. So the same thing it isn't even just that, but like if you exercise and you see somebody that's really super into exercise and you hang around those type of people, you tend to like catch it. If it's something that sticks. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It does. It really does. And you're talking about that pulling off energy. So what I hear in that is you're really just setting boundaries on what you need to do in order to achieve your goals, in order to love yourself. And as you're looking at who you were and how those people respond to you, you have to understand that there are seasons that we have with people, mm-hmm. that there are reasons why people are in our life at a certain time to encourage us to work through something or to walk alongside each other. But then there's times where that's no longer necessary and you have to thank them and just, maybe quietly back out of the room. There's different ways to disengage with that. Yeah. So Jen, what are some different ways if people were interested, there's a lot of great conversation that you've been able to have today where people might want to work with you more. What are the ways that you work with people?
So I do coaching and speaking. So those are the primary ways that people can work with me. Individual or group coaching is available too. So those are the best way to reach out. And
how can they find you?
I was going to say the best place to find me, I kept it simple. I did learn one thing along the way from the marketing. Everything is Jennifer Ternay. That's my handle both on LinkedIn, Instagram, and the website as well.
All right. I love that unified brand and consistency. We don't have to figure out where you are on different platforms. That's so great. Well, such valuable information. So if you are looking at making a shift and need someone to help you understand, particularly if you're looking at fractional work, there's a lot of executives within corporations that will hire an executive coach, but where is that person for you when you have your own business doing fractional work? How do you navigate that? Well, now we know. We call Jennifer Ternay, and she will be a great resource for you. And Jen, you've got a resource you're going to provide our listeners, so we're going to put that link in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Lisa. It was great being here.
All right. So one of my biggest takeaways from today is that in the world where no longer we have the security of the 30-year corporate job with a company that people think are going to take care of them, the destiny now needs to lie in your hands. So take that expertise, consider becoming a fractional executive. And when you do that, you have that freedom and flexibility to create your own adventure like Jen was talking about. All we need is that support. So reach out to her. We'll have her contact information in the show notes. She'll help you with that mindset to get the right trajectory. So I trust what you got what you needed. And until next week, go chase your passion. It will lead you to connect with purpose, and you'll be there to find that personal brand of integrity. It's about living a life of so much more on the way to finding your legendary self. Thank you, everybody.